Hello, everybody. I am so excited to have you join us today for our weekly webinar with my dear friend, Dr. Tom Necela. Can I just tell y'all that in the 13 years that I have worked in chiropractic, he was one of the very first consultants that I had the great pleasure of getting to know. He was one of the first people to talk to me about billing, coding, documentation, and of course, today's topic of discussion, buying and selling your practice. It was interesting is that 13 years ago, it was an emerging topic about how you were supposed to exit out of your career and ease into retirement. And over the last year, it has become one of the hottest topics and one of the ones that no matter what I'm teaching, where I'm teaching, that I get the most questions about. And to this day, he is still my go-to person that I refer people to find out the best way to start thinking about your exit strategy. And like I tell my students that I teach at chiropractic colleges all around the country, I tell them it is never too early in your career to start thinking about your exit plan. So I am so excited, Tom, to have you here today. And y'all forgive us for being a couple minutes late starting this thing because it's been so long since we've seen each other that I was just running my mouth.
And chatty. Yeah.
Well, I miss an old friend. I'm just going to have to come to Texas and come see you.
That's fine. That's fine.
Well, you go ahead and take it away.
All right. Thanks so much, Christy. And welcome to all of you. And today's topic, as you can see from the screen there, if you see on the left-hand side, not my bald glowing head on the right side, but how to sell your chiropractic practice. And I think the subtitle is really key: without giving your business away. And this is a super important topic for all of you. And again, my name is Tom Necela from Strategic Chiropractor, and my website is strategicdc.com. If any of you are not familiar, you'll want to go there. And if you are in what I call the home stretch and thinking about selling your practice in the next, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years, we've got a lot of information that can be helpful to you in planning this thing that nobody taught us about in school. And really what we're going to be talking about today is what I call the 7 common and costly mistakes in respect to buying and selling your practice. And I hope by the end of this webinar that we could avoid looking like the guy on the right-hand side, kind of scratching our head and somewhat disappointed with what's going on, and more look like the guy on the left who's excited, who's prepared, and who is ready to maximize their practice sale. And in order to do that, I'm just going to start out really simply with what I call marketplace misinformation. I think the single biggest factor out there right now for people not exiting their practice or not selling their business successfully is simply the chiropractic rumor mill. And really, that rumor mill is I could say alive and well. It is not well because it gives a lot of misinformation. So I would love to hear what you all have heard. So I think we can play along and get in that chat box. And here's a quick question we'll just start out with. Throw it out to all of you and say, what is the marketplace like right now for selling your chiropractic practice? Go ahead and use that chat button and just give me a word or two to describe the chiropractic marketplace in terms of what it's like, again, right now, in terms of being a seller for a chiropractic practice. Okay. And I'm going to turn off my video there so that I can focus on your answers in the chat and you all can focus on the slides. And again, quick question. What's the marketplace like right now? Okay, so we're getting a few answers coming right in, and thanks for those who are being super honest and say, I have no idea. Jim, Tara, there's a few people that say poor, bad, slow, weak, and let's see. I have not met anyone yet who can help us. I inserted yet because I hope to be someone that is a helpful resource of all of you. Now we're getting in some all positive spectrums here. Great opportunity. Good time to sell is basically we've kind of got people all over the map. And that's what I literally expected. And let's kind of dive into the real specifics of what's it like today. Now we're hosting this webinar at the start of 2023, but it is most certainly not a build it and buyers will come world. Nobody's going to come out of the cornfields looking to buy your practice, just drop in your lap out of nowhere. And so that's one thing that chiropractors need to realize is this is something that we have to be able to strategically plan. That's one of our big goals for this webinar is to help you plan towards what is the next best steps for you. Secondly, your practice sale is not like a house sale. And I don't care whether you're a buyer or a seller, it is certainly has some things that resemble a house sale, but there's many aspects that are different. And I know some of you say, hey, for example, the houses are flying off the shelves in my area. Houses are selling here in 2 days, 2 weeks, 2 months. And even if the housing market is slowing down a little bit in your area, that is okay in the sense that your business sale is a totally independent and different market. There are also other things that are not like a house sale in terms of the actual process of the sale and even the transaction itself. So you can't assume, hey, I've sold a house before, I know what I'm doing, or it's going to go just like that. No, it may not. Number 3 would be that there are some in our profession that maybe have an impression that banks are not lending. I'm here to tell you that banks absolutely are lending. And that is very good news, especially if you were among the chiropractors who maybe bought a practice, maybe let's say 20 years ago or something like that. And there wasn't a bank around that would give you a loan. Now, on the other end, the banks are definitely lending to buyers. And that would lead you to the next question. Well, are buyers buying? Absolutely, yes, the buyers are buying. And I can give you a few good reasons and even maybe a few surprising reasons. But, as much as some in our profession would say, oh, these buyers can't buy. They come out of school $200,000 in debt. There's no way they can buy. Well, first of all, you need to understand that your target person to buy your practice is not likely a new grad. Well, yes, they maybe come out $200,000 in debt. They have no experience. The banks want them to have a little experience. They don't know what they want. They don't know how to run a practice, all of that. The biggest segment of buyers is actually what I call the experienced associates. Now they've been out for a few years. They've worked for somebody. They got some experience. They've got some money. They've got some direction. And guess what? They want to go buy a practice. And so buyers are most certainly buying. Now, what all that means is the reality is this is a very active market. And this is probably one of the surprising things that happened since the pandemic. Because yes, it's been years and years building that chiropractic student loans have been increasing. But if you look at it from that way, if somebody's $200,000 in debt, even a few years out of school, the idea of starting up a practice may be more risky and they can't afford to take that risk. Okay. The other thing is that if somebody is that deep in debt, they may not be able to afford to work as your associate because, some of you say, hey, I'll get in and I'll pay my associate a percentage of whatever they bring in. Well, they bring in nothing, they get nothing, and they're not able to pay their student loans. And so what's happened also, and a third thing since the pandemic is that some of these docs lost their jobs, and it's put a lot of buyers into the marketplace looking for practices to buy. And these are not the same people that are associates, and these are not the same people that are startups. Buyers have a very different demographic, and Couple that with, yes, some of you may fit this category. We have the baby boomers and a large segment of our population. Well, guess what? Some of them are chiropractors too, and baby boomers are looking to retire. So if you have a lot of buyers and a lot of sellers, you can't really call it a buyer's market or a seller's market. You call it an active market. And we have seen that our sales have massively increased since 2020. And again, that's not something that we could have predicted. And so what that means for you is really good news, because the subtitle of our webinar today was how to sell without giving it all away. Well, the good news is if you have an active market, then like some of these folks, you don't have to give it away. You can sell your practice just like all of these guys did here. And you can not have to give it away if, and here's the big if you don't treat your practice sale like a science experiment. And really, when we say, what does that mean? Well, you don't need to, or you shouldn't experiment with the price and keep lowering it until you give it away. You should not just throw you an ad or try some marketing and hope it works to bring in a buyer as some sort of scientific experiment. You shouldn't pray that the deal doesn't blow up after closing. No, really, you have to be much more strategic than that. You have to properly price your practice. You have to have aggressive marketing, and you need strategic guidance and expertise to get you there. Those are the practices that are going to sell. And unfortunately, the lion's share of those who don't have those qualities will not. So you have to be pretty serious about if somebody gives you a rumor, because like I just hopefully explained, a lot of the misinformation out there is simply that, misinformation. It missed the target. Now, that's not to say that selling is not without its challenges. The number 2 mistake that chiropractors have been making, and this is the newest mistake because it only happened really in the last several years, is that there are some dangerous debts that have been floating around that can challenge or even kill a person's ability to sell. Now, you should know that any level of debt when you go to sell needs to be dealt with. But what sellers were not prepared for in the last couple of years was the money that was coming from our government and its possible repercussions, because nobody knew. It was new. Nobody knew what would happen. And then there was a lot of things floating around in the rumor mill, and there was a lot of things that wasn't clear. Well, if you are thinking of selling your practice and you still have a PPP loan out there, most of those we were able to be forgiven. Get it forgiven. If you have not applied or done that already. And here's the good news. In my experience working with sellers, since the PPP loans have been coming out, I would say that the vast majority of them get them forgiven. If not, when you go to sell, then guess what? They're going to want that portion to be forgiven, or they're going to hold back some of your money until it's forgiven or paid back. Now, the PPP loans seem to cause a small challenge for some, and again, you can get those forgiven. What seems to be a bigger challenge for others is the economic injury disaster loans, or the EID loans. Now, I will tell you that the government seemed to change their game about halfway through. And for some of these people, the EID loans were not personally guaranteed, and for others, they were personally guaranteed. Well, if you took out a big EID loan and did not pay it back, you need to understand that the EID loans were administered by the SBA, Small Business Association. And guess who lends on most chiropractic practice sales? The Small Business Association. So they're not going to have you owing money on one hand and giving money to your buyer on the other. And so you need to understand that those EID loans can hurt your sale if they are not repaid or dealt with. And again, this is new information, and we can call it a mistake, or we can just call it an unfortunate reality that if you're in that situation, you're going to have to figure out how to deal with it. That may delay your plans, or it may cause them to change. Now, another thing that many sellers don't realize that ends up being an unfortunate mistake is the accounts receivable. Now, here in this audience with ChiroHealthUSA, I really hope that I'm preaching to the choir, because I hope that you all are utilizing ChiroHealthUSA to build the best cash practice and have the least accounts receivable out there by giving your patients compliant legal ways to pay via cash. So if you are not, this is going to be a really easy way to consider joining ChiroHealthUSA, because you need to understand what happens to your accounts receivable on a sale. In fact, let's go to the chat and let's ask you, what happens to accounts receivable in a sale situation? Type that into the chat box, and we're going to find out what happens, because this is yet another thing you need to know, a common and it could be very costly mistake that chiropractors make in their sale. So again, type it in the chat. Give me your answers, and if you give a great answer, we'll probably give you a nice shout out. If you don't give a good answer, we won't pick on you. What happens to accounts receivable in a sale? I wonder if anyone even knows that, or if you have some options. All right, so yeah, one doc's right in. You pay taxes on it. Another says depends on whether the buyer is willing to acquire the accounts receivable. Another doc, you hope it's purchased. You keep it and collect it, or you sell it to the buyer. Part of that is the purchase goes in with the purchase of the clinic. All right. So again, sounds like you guys are a nice educated group, and you have answers all over the map, because the reality of your accounts receivable is that all of you who have typed in so far have given a possible answer, and the reality is there's no one set answer. But I can tell you this, that if you use ChiroHealthUSA in a way to reduce your accounts receivable, you'll be happier like the fella on the right, and you won't be frustrated or wondering where the money is like the fella on the left. But in terms of details, let me tell you that your accounts receivable, when sold or conveyed with your sale, is always sold at a discount. Now, the primary reasons are that your accounts receivable is unpredictable when and how much will come in. So it's discounted. And what I mean from discounted is discounted from its face value. So if you have $100,000 of accounts receivable, you're not getting $100,000 for that. Okay. In fact, as you can see on bullet number 2 there, you should expect to lose 50% or more of your accounts receivable face value when selling. And the truth of the matter is, they divide a line in the sand around the 90-day mark, and they will discount all accounts receivable, but they discount the AR under 90 days less than over 90 days. But if you want a quick, easy kind of rule of thumb that won't disappoint you in the end, then say, well, expect to lose half or more of that. Now, you also need to understand, as some of you wrote in, some buyers don't even want it. Okay, so some buyers, you can try to sell it to them, some don't want it. And another thing that many chiropractors don't understand is some banks won't lend on it. Or even more specifically, they won't lend on all of it because they don't understand it. Okay. Now here, we're all chiropractors, or on this webinar, we understand, for example, if you take a PI case, that you might not see that money for a couple, 3 years or something like that. You might not even be worried about it. But the reality of it is the banks don't quite understand that, despite our trying to tell them this. They look at your accounts receivable more like you're running a dry cleaners. And I can tell you this, if I left my shirt at your dry cleaner business for 2 years, we can kind of conclude 2 things. 1, I don't care about my shirt. And 2, you're not getting your money. And we all know that accounts receivable in the chiropractic setting is a bit different than that. So it is important for you to do the math and plan ahead. And one of the best ways that you can plan ahead. If you said, man, it sounds like a slaughter, they're going to discount my accounts receivable so much, is, again, join ChiroHealthUSA. Okay. And that's a preventative measure, because obviously if you're not waiting on insurance payments, then you have less accounts receivable. Easy, right? Second way is to clean up your accounts receivable reporting. And you would say, well, what do you mean? Well, some of you, if you've been in practice for 40 years, I've talked to sellers who say, oh, Tom, I've never written off anything. Looks like I got $32 million of AR, but I don't really think that's right. Well, guess what? You're going to scare a buyer if you say that you got 32 million of AR and some of it's coming from 1982. They know that's not collectible. So you kind of clean that up to avoid scaring away the buyers, but also to help you with bullet number 3, to motivate your team to work the collectible old accounts receivable. If you have some money that's out there that is collectible, it benefits you in 2 ways to get it. Okay. The number 1 way is, if we collect this money now, it is now income that counts towards the collections of your current year value and increases the value of your practice, right? I mean, it's pretty simple. You don't have to know anything about valuations to say, hey, the more money you collect and the more money you make, the more valuable your business is. Simple as that. So if you bring in that old accounts receivable, that will help your business value. The second way it helps you is that it prevents you from losing that money to a discount, right? So if eventually you say, well, I don't want the hassle of trying to collect the AR after I sell, I'll just sell it off. Well, you just sold it off at, like we showed you before, a pretty steep discount. And so for some of you, because it's unpredictable how much it is, some of it's unpredictable whether the buyer even wants it, unpredictable whether the bank will even loan on it, you may just decide that the best thing to do is work it as hard as possible and then don't depend on your accounts receivable for your payday. Now, if you have a very large PI practice, there are some other solutions, and I understand that your situation would be different. But for the average chiropractor, they'd be much better just kind of working it off, and then, again, using any money for the accounts receivable sort of as a bonus towards their business sale. All right. Now, the next area that we, as a profession, really need to get better on for a successful sale is in and around the assumptions we make with associates. Now, if you say, I don't have an associate right now, well, then perhaps you're not making this assumptions. If you think I'll never get an associate, well, great, you don't have to deal with it. But for those of you who are considering it or have one right now, it's very important, because you could literally start out your path towards a sale or transition of your practice with everybody looking happy, fingers crossed like this. And then next thing you know, your associate is treating you like this, like, get out of here, go away. I don't want what you're offering me. And the chief challenge that I've seen over the years is simply this word assumptions. And from the owner standpoint, the seller standpoint, the mistakes we seem to make repeatedly is that we get our associate and we kind of say something like, someday all this will be yours. And what we leave out in that statement, and we actually will hire the people that based on that statement, someday, I'm going to retire. Someday I'm going to sell you this. Someday this will all be yours. You can have all of this. And what we leave out of that very, very weighty statement, because somebody literally might take your job simply because you said that and some other job they got offered didn't. And it's a very weighty statement, but it's missing 3 qualifiers. Number 1, when. So someday this will all be yours. When? Are we talking about a year, 2 years, 5, 10? Second, how much? In other words, someday this will be all yours. And if we don't insert a number, are you giving it to them for free? Are they expecting to get it for 20 grand, 200 grand, 2 million? Those are very different numbers. And number 3 is, how will they get it? So in other words, when you say someday this will be all yours, do you love them so much that you are going to loan your associate the money? Or would you then say, absolutely not? Why would I do that? I would be taking a huge risk. And I agree, you may be. So how are they going to get it? If it's not you, is it a bank? Are you only hiring people that have rich uncles? I don't know of a screening tool that you can legally effectively do that. But, those three qualifiers need to be presented into the equation. Otherwise, you're going to be going down a road, making some very big assumptions, and your associate will be too. And then you hear these things. They're a train wreck. Oh, I was planning to sell to my associate, and then it all fell apart. Well, most of the time I hear that, I can go dive in, and these three qualifying questions have not been addressed. Now, it's not all your fault, because on the other side of the fence, buyers make mistakes with associates too. There are buyers who will tell you, someday I want to buy this. Now, in fact, the reason you hired them may be because they say, I want to own. I just don't want to be working as an associate my whole life. And you can smell some ambition in them. You can smell a successor. You can see someone who you could feel is a good fit for your practice, and that someone who could be your replacement, ultimately your retirement or your exit strategy. Because they say, someday I want to buy this. And again, that is a super weighty statement, and you may hire them based on that, but there are three qualifiers that are missing from their weighty statement. When? Whoa, goodness, I'm $250,000 in student loan debt. I wouldn't buy this thing for at least 10 years. Well, if you want to get out in 2, there's a big bit of a disconnect. How much? Well, doc, I thought you were going to give it to me for the fact that I worked here for the last 2.5 months. Now, some of you might say, well, that's ridiculous. Well, what about if they say, I thought you were going to give it to me because I worked here for the last 2.5 years? Are you going to really give away a $200,000, $300,000, $500,000 practice because they worked for you for 2.5 years? And by the way, you paid them during that time? Or do you have them as an indentured servant? I have not seen those contracts, but I don't think people are doing that. How are they going to buy this? Oh, well, doc, I was expecting you to owner finance. Oh, because certainly I have no money and I don't have anybody to lend me any money. I got a 420 credit score and I just declared bankruptcy last year. Very important qualifiers that need to be discussed. If you're going to go down the road with an associate who, again, you think is going to buy your practice, if this is part of your exit strategy, you don't have these type of conversations, then you are in for a world of hurt. And then the third piece of the puzzle that's missing. So you got a buyer conversation, a seller conversation, on the associate fence. And the real answer, though, is that until you have a conversation about money, until you can put a price tag on this thing, then I joke that, all your associates will be interested. In fact, if you put your practice on the market, just try to find a buyer. They'll all be interested until you can put a price tag on it. Because it's very different to say, I want 20,000 for my practice, 200 or 2 million. And those are very different people that will say yes to any of those three prices. So if you are considering an associate, then really, if that's going to be a meaningful part of your exit strategy, you need to have those couple conversations, and then you need to go to the next step and get the answer to their price question and get a valuation to determine the value of your business so you can have a meaningful conversation. Otherwise, then this is just going to end up in a situation kind of like our friend Dr. Mario's, and maybe you guys recognize him, and smart guy. Obviously, many of you have probably taken his webinars right here on ChiroHealthUSA or around the country. His billing, coding, and compliance webinar, super smart guy, great practice, came to me a few years ago and said, hey, I want to slow down and I want to focus on speaking. Right. And what did he find out? That he's had an associate who'd worked with him for years, great guy, but Mario never had any of those conversations. He might have suspected that he couldn't buy, but when it came to him, I said, here's what you need to ask this guy. And we gave him some conversations to have with his associate to get him off the fence. And it was determined, as you can see in red, the key of Mario's story is really he had a non-buyer. So you don't want to find out that you have a non-buyer associate in the 11th hour. Like, hey, I'm planning to get out next year, and suddenly find out the associate who's been working with you for the past 3, 4, 5, 8 years is not a buyer. That's a stressful situation. Okay. Now, fortunately, Mario said, I think I have another possible buyer, but he's a student. Now, this was a bit of a long shot because, as I just explained to you before, students are not your ideal buyers. They're deep in debt. They're just young. They don't know what they're doing, maybe. But anyway, he said this might work for him. Of course, the next bullet there is he had no clue what his practice is worth. And one of the things, again, I think Mario's a very, very smart guy, but one of the things he wrote to me after we sold is, I would have sold my practice for pennies on the dollar had I not known, had I not engaged you to help us. So anyway, he wasn't even sure how much he could sell it for, if this could be done to a student. And lo and behold, that is the beauty of having some expert guidance. We were able to help him from stuck with his dead end associate to sold in 5 months' time. And really, the key there is that we have to make sure, if we have an associate in the relationship, that we do take these very strategic moves, and we either move forward or move on. And it's as simple as that. Now, those were 4 of the 7 that I think are a significant challenge. But in this next half here, we've got what I would consider the 3 most dangerous mistakes. So for some of you right now, you might be feeling pretty good. I'm well aware of those things. I don't make those mistakes. So great. For other of you, maybe you're feeling like the water's heating up a little bit. Well, these 3 can really squash or kill your sale altogether. So number 1 is what I just consider bad timing. Now, this poor fella here in the chair, he obviously has waited a little too long to hatch his exit strategy plan. And unfortunately, I was just talking to Christy about this right before the webinar. You know, it's a little morbid to think, but at one point, we're all going to die. At some point, there are many of you who will become disabled and unable to practice. You could have a disagreement with an associate, and that will squash your sale. You could have a divorce, and that impacts things in a big way. So really, the timing of this is, well, how can I plan for all this? Well, the key is you just need to plan ahead and hopefully not have any of those things happen to you, but at least take some proactive steps and understand what proper timing is like in the context of your sale. And that really starts with one simple question. Let's play along, get on your chat and answer this for me. How long does it take to sell? And obviously the context here is, how long does it take to sell the typical chiropractic practice? How long does it take to sell a chiropractic practice, right? Go ahead and type your answers in there. I think that we're going to get some really good answers here. So far, y'all have been very, very astute with your answers, and type it in to the questions box. Again, how long? How long does it take? Give me, weeks, months, years, whatever number you want to do. Just if you write a number, qualify it. That way I know, what we're talking about here. All right. So we've got Dr. Kimberly coming in at 9 to 12 months. James says 6 months. Mark says 1 year. Chang says 1 year. 6 to 9 months. 6 to 36 months. No idea. Thanks for being honest. And a year. Great. All right. 3 to 6 months. Now, of all those answers, I think most of them are spot on. We've got 2 that I'm going to point out that are probably on the outside range. And here's the actual. So a fast sale in the chiropractic setting, and again, it does not matter what your house sells for. It does not matter how fast your dentist sold his practice. It does not matter how fast your vet sold hers, your podiatrist, anybody. It's chiropractic. That's all we want to know about. Fast sale is less than 6 months, and I'll explain a little bit why on all of these. But fast is less than 6 months. Okay, typical is about 9 to 12 months, or maybe you could say average. Okay, a moderate sale is about 12 to 18 months. And here's what I consider moderate. Moderate probably means it was headed for average and maybe something went wrong, so it got a little delayed. Okay. And then a slower sale is upwards of 18 months. Now, we'll start with that slower one or work our way backward. Okay. A slower sale is typically going to be a practice that is one of or more of a couple extremes. Okay. So one is you either have a very large or very small practice. Okay. And, very small practices sometimes are harder to sell under 100,000 in collections because sometimes buyers have an opinion that there's not much there, might as well just start it from scratch. Okay. Very large practices over $1 million can be harder to sell. Although, when I tell people that and say, hey, buckle your seatbelt, then all of a sudden we'll sell one pretty quickly and we'd be proven wrong. But statistically speaking, there are fewer buyers in the 7-figure market. Okay. So that's slow. Slower practices can be a practice that's in maybe a very rural or challenging area. Okay. But again, it's going to interact with other factors too there, or maybe a very niche practice that has a technique that's not, commonly taught in chiropractic schools or has a very small niche. Those can be slower. And again, doesn't have to, and you'd have to kind of roll it in with what other factors you got going on. The moderate practice, as I mentioned, is really kind of the typical, but usually something happened that slowed it down, or maybe it had a smaller factor that would cause it to go slower. Typical is 9 to 12 months. Now, fast, here's why it's considered fast if you can do this in less than 6 months, even if I have a buyer for you tomorrow. Okay. The majority of the buyers have to go to a bank to get financed. Okay. The financing process is slow. For example, you can talk to SBA lenders that they'll say, oh, it's 6 to 8 weeks. And I usually add the word minimum on the end. So if we find you a buyer tomorrow, the buyer has a conversation or a couple conversations with you, they meet you to see the practice. We can call that month 1. You send them over to a bank and that's month 2, month 3, maybe even month 4. And then the final month after that, then we're wrapping up with contracts. That's 5 months. So that's why fast is less than 6 months. Pretty much everything goes right. Now, can you shortchange that and get it going even faster than that? Yes, if you have a cash buyer, then it can typically go even faster than that. All right. But those are the numbers on average. And you all did well there. Now, here's the other challenge with timing. Timing the market is not as simple as it sounds because really you've got two pieces of the puzzle here. Okay. It's not just you getting out, it's a buyer's ability to get in. So you might say, I want to be out by the end of the year. And let's say you find your perfect buyer. Maybe their finances are not such that they can get in by the end of the year. Maybe they want to get in sooner. Maybe they're not licensed yet. Maybe they've got other things going on that will affect their timing. So it's not simply your timing, which then leads me to advise most of my clients it's easier to start sooner than later because we don't know the buyer's timing. And the fact of the matter is it's easier to slow down a sale than speed one up. If you were looking to sell by the end of the year, you found your buyer in November and you said, well, hey, can we just finish out the calendar year so it's nice and clean and simple? That's easy. Okay. If you're in November and you say, well, I found my buyer and you said, I need to sell tomorrow or I needed to sell in June or something like that. Well, not so easy. Okay. Now in this, it's also very important for you to understand your business and where it stands in what I call the sell curve will impact the timing on which it sells as well. And it'll can even impact the value. So for example, if we look at this curve, basically we've got a standard bell curve where everyone starts out in practice on the left-hand side with 0 income and 0 years in practice. Okay. As you go upward and onward in your in your career, you go from what I call struggle phase, where you're really not making any money, to stability, where you're saying, hey, it's a little stable. We're not worried about the doors closing. And then you hit your peak of success. And at success phase, that is where you are kind of in your sweet spot. Your business is doing the best that it has or can, and it will. Because eventually what happens to most practices is then they start entering the backside of the curve. And some of the things they did to get up the curve on the left-hand side, they begin to slack off on, which is why I call it the slack phase. And that allows the business revenue to slip a little bit or slide a little bit. And then eventually it gets negative momentum and it really begins to slip. And if you notice, all the way at the two extreme ends of the graph, or the bell curve there's little, can't think of the word for it, no signs. This isn't going to happen signs. Okay. And those are where it is not likely that anybody will sell. Okay. Now, if you look at the numbers in the middle of your picture there, this corresponds with how chiropractors tend to sell. Now, obviously, everyone would love to sell in that peak, that success, but statistically speaking, only 10% will do it. Okay, 20% will sell in the slack phase. 60% will sell in the slip phase, where obviously the value is way down. And then there's about 10% that will sell on the other side of the curve when it's going up. And usually those are people that maybe their life has changed, maybe they moved to a totally different situation. Okay. But anyway, we need to understand that, because that impacts the timing of when you sell and, again, the value of your sell. Now, you can use the clock to your advantage. Okay, if you understand how valuations work, how a practice value is determined. So, for example, if you were to go to a bank and say, hey, I want money to buy a practice, the bank will say, I need the seller's last 3 years of financials. Okay, so sitting here right now, that would be 2022, 21, 20. Okay, as we move forward, then it's going to be 21, 22, 23. And about halfway through the year, banks will typically blend a little of the first year, the last, most recent year, and the furthest year from whatever the calendar date is. Okay. So how do you use this to your advantage? Well, if you're on an upswing and you say, hey, I had a real good 2022, well, this might be an excellent time to think about selling. Because if we look back 3 years and your last year was your best, then I will tell you, hey, you don't have to set any records. Just keep doing what you're doing this year and you're in for a good ride. Now, on the other hand, if your business is going down, then you absolutely need to get out, then your value or your price may be impacted a little. Or if you have some flexibility, which is why I love the fact that all of you are here on this webinar. I'm not sure where you are in your journey. But if you can plan and say, hey, I might need to work this thing for another year or two, and I'm to get this working to my advantage, because right now, if it's not, well, if you got more gas in your tank, then you can keep going. But that's how to use the clock to your advantage for your timing. And to give you a quick example of a successful client of ours that did, this is Dr. Bill. He had great practice, but he was in a pretty rural area. And so when we were talking about the timing for him to get out, I told him, yeah, Bill, no offense to you in the town, but it might take more than a year for you to find a buyer. So he decided to start sooner than later. And I highlighted that in red because that was his smartest decision. Now, what we didn't know is his would-be buyer appeared after a month. and he and I laugh about it, but we say, well, you plan for the worst, but boy, this was great. The only challenge was the seller happened to be a new grad. Now the good news was we were able to get that new grad buyer a bank loan, and the total time really was 4 months. And again, it's just not always possible to speed it up. In this case, it happened, but he set out with enough time that I think we would have got there either way. And the good news was he was flexible to go sooner. Okay. Now, on the other side of it, sometimes it happens the other way. Dr. Andy came with us and he says, hey, I've already got a buyer for you. This is going to be easy. I've got an associate that's been working together and he's ready now. I put in quotes, now, to buy a practice. Well, as the now went forward, it kind of moved very slowly forward. And as we actually got his buyer into financing, one of the things that came apparent is the bank said to his buyer, why aren't you going to buy the building with the business? Because sometimes that works mathematically in your buyer's favor. And he thought about it and he said, yeah, that sounds good. Well, guess what? That kind of took the process down in another direction, slowed it down even a little more. And eventually the bank and the buyer moved slowly toward that sale. And what was this easy sale, wound up taking about 12 months. So again, just the rule here with your timing is it easier to start sooner than later. Now, I mentioned there was 3 very dangerous things. The first is that most people will leave things way too late. Okay, the timing is very, very important. And I get guys who ask me constantly, hey, can you get me out in 2 months? And I say, I'm good, but I'm not a miracle worker. The second really big dangerous mistake, and this is actually mistake number 5, is the pricing. Okay. So mistake number 6, I think I might have counted wrong. This is the pricing. Okay. Now, whether the glasses you're wearing just are making you see a different reality than my experience, or whether you believe in Santa, the tooth fairy, or some sort of genie who's going to work everything out for the banks and the buyers, these are different people than I deal with. And as a result, that your price can really be one of the biggest things to halt or stop your progress. So let's talk about this. And in fact, let's go to you first. And let's ask this very simple, but not so simple question. How much is a practice worth? I mean, this is like the $1 million question that so many chiropractors want to need to know. How much is a practice worth? Type it in the questions panel and we'll see what we know here. How much is a practice worth? Okay. Now, give me some sort of formula, some sort of figure, some sort of ballpark rumor mill that you've heard, and let me know. Type it in that question box. How much is a chiropractic practice worth? Because again, if we're saying this is one of the most dangerous mistakes chiropractors make in terms of pricing their practice incorrectly, then we need to hone in on this. Okay. All right. So we're getting the answers coming in here. We've got 2 to 3 times 1 year's gross, net times 2, 1 year's gross, average profit for the past 3 years. Let's see. Got some more kind of coming in here. And these are all great answers so far. 50 to 80% of collections. All right. So look at even just those answers there. 2 to 3 times 1 year's gross. Now, I would then say, are you talking about gross collections? Are you talking about somebody, because the next guy has net times 2? Is that the gross income you make? Is that average profit per year? That sounds like the back end number, not the collections. 50 to 80% of collections sounds like a front end number. 1.5 times the last 3 years net. So we've got a lot of different ways to look at it. And I'm not even saying some of these formulas are wrong. The problem is even how you define some of the terms. Okay. And the challenge is that any ballpark figure is going to suffer from a few different perspective problems. Okay. First is, well, here's what you see over here on the left. You see this as this is your baby that you've built up over all these years. You've nursed from the baby stage to the toddler and then watched it grow up. And the way you look at it is this baby still has a lot of growing to do and has a lot of potential in this baby. And this baby can sail to greater heights than ever before, sort of like the proud parent. They hope their children do better than they do, right? Now, what your buyer sees might be a little different sometimes. They might see an old kind of half sinking ship where the owner has kind of let things slide and slip, and it's kind of slowly making its way down. And if we look at things, even in just what we discussed before of the timing, even how they see things can be impacted by the timing of when you choose to go to the market, how you choose to present yourself with respect to the practice sale timing. right? The other thing is over here on the right, when I talk to people about what their practice is worth, they generally speak with respect to all the pictures on the right. So they'll tell me up here, you can see, hey, oh, this is, it's a great looking office. I mean, it's recently remodeled. It's top of the line, everything. It's just beautiful. It's got all the latest equipment, everything. Or they'll say, I have a super staff. I mean, we're just like, we're like a big family. We're going to have a great team. This staff is, they push, they run the business. Or they'll say, oh, our patients just love this. We have such a great reputation in the community. We've got 5-star Google reviews everywhere. Or they'll say, you know what? There's so much potential in this practice. I barely work. I mean, I'm working 15 hours a week, 20 hours a week. I don't have the energy anymore. A young buck can get in here and double this practice easy just by working some more hours. Or they'll say, this is the hottest spot in the country. I mean, there's people moving here left and right because it's beautiful in the mountains. It's beautiful right by the beach because it's beautiful because we have A, B, and C making our city do this, that, or the other thing. And they'll say, we should be able to find a buyer. These buyers will be, beating each other up over to who gets to buy this thing. Or they'll say something like, we're on all the panels here. It makes it easy for these buyers to come in. They'll be able to participate. Or they'll say, you can't even get on the panels around here. So they need to buy this thing. And this thing should be a premium because I'm on the panels. And what it all looks like is they can see a future that is very bright, and that's good. And that they can see potential that's very good and very attractive. And the difference is your value of your practice is not based on potential. It's based on performance, the tangible performance. What kind of money did this thing bring in for you? Okay, that's what it's based on. And sure, yes, you have some equipment that goes into that. Yes, it can impact it if you're in a nicer town, in a more attractive town. And yes, there's attractive qualities about working less or having good reviews and an excellent staff and all that good stuff. But when it comes down to it, then the big thing is that the single biggest driver of your price is your profits. It's the tangible value. Now, we understand that, hey, you've got a good accountant and they try to keep some of the profits away from the tax man and all that, but the money is there. And that is what will dictate the price. Now, here's the problem with some of the ballpark scenarios many of you threw out on the chat. Because if we're looking to play some horseshoes, all you got to do is get near the pin and you score. Right. And a lot of you threw out, I think the most common answer was about 60 to 80% of the ballpark. Somebody even wrote 50% to 80%. That's close enough. Many of you wrote a factor of collections and all that. Yeah, those things can get you in the ballpark. But here's the problem with those ballpark type of formulas. One is if your practice, let's just split the middle, say it's worth 70% of collections and you collect 500,000. Okay. Let's say the chiropractor across the street collects 500,000. Okay. They're both worth 70%, but one of them has an overhead that's running at 50, 60%. And the other has a lean and mean overhead at 25, 30%. Well, the one practice with the lower overhead is way more profitable. So how in the world can it be worth the same as the guy across the street? And the easy answer is it can't. Therein lies the big problem with ballpark pricing. The other big problem with ballpark pricing is we're such a small profession, the banks don't even know our ballpark. So they use standard business formulas to value the practice. That's what we do it here at Strategic Chiropractor. Okay. Then the third big problem with ballpark pricing is then you set yourself up for negotiations hassle. If everybody's just getting in the ballpark, almost everyone assumes that you're going to negotiate. That results in a low listing to sale price ratio. Okay. Meaning you start at one price and you move it way down until you finally sell it. This decreases confidence in both the buyer and the seller sometimes. And a lot of times it will increase the need for owner financing, meaning you're in the ballpark, but you're not in the bank's ballpark. So you got to be the bank. All of those are generally undesirable things for most sellers. Now, with a proper pricing, which means evaluation, you turn all that around. Okay, you have fewer negotiations. Both you and the buyer have better confidence that the price point is what it is. That results in a high listing to sale price ratio and increased bank financing. Okay, we don't need to get creative and come up with the craziest plan on the planet to sell your practice. If it's priced and the banks will lend, it's very simple and it can get you there. Okay. Interesting story here with Dr. Scott. Had an excellent high income earning practice. Okay. His income is in top 10% of all chiropractors. He's on the market with another broker who I just had to give him the flat out, honest truth. Scott, hey, the guy overpriced it. Okay. We valued it. We lowered it a little to the fair market value. We found a buyer after 6 weeks, but here's the funny thing. The buyer said the practice is ugly. He said this thing has 1970 paneled walls, 1982 shag carpet, all that stuff. But what we were able to do is educate the buyer on what he's really buying. Remember the tangible value? That's what we talked about in that last slide. The tangible value is that profit. And Scott was making a ton of profit off that. And we let him know that, hey, when you as the buyer are making this kind of profit, you can replace the carpet, redo the walls or knock them all out. I don't care what you do. But that helped us sell his practice again after being on the market with another broker for over a year in 4 months. And both of them happily working together after that. Now, into the home stretch, your final mistake that I see, and again, these last three were the most dangerous or deadly, is that many chiropractors don't consider all their options. Options, plural. See, some of you act like the only way you're getting out of here is to walk a tightrope over a great mountain divide, or that your vehicle of your business is a tiny little skateboard or scooter, and that's about all you get. Some of you will say, hey, my practice can actually move a little bit, but others, if you realize that you have multiple ways to get out of here, realize you have a plan to really fly out of here. If you don't just narrow it all down to just, this is my only way. Now, I will tell you there are what I consider 10 good transition options. Okay, the 3 down the bottom right are options, but they're all lousy. Liquidation sale is basically you're just selling the equipment and the records. The record sale is just the files and shutdown, all really bad. The 3 in the blue box, family transfer, remote management, or investor sale, are possibly good options, but they're not available to everyone. So for example, if you don't have a son or a daughter to transfer it to, you're not transferring it. If your business isn't set up such that you can run it from afar, remote management wouldn't be good. And investors typically like, very large practices where maybe there's an associate or they can kind of plug somebody in. So that's not for everyone. The list on the left there in the green circle is viable options that would work for most. So the traditional sale, this is sell and leave. Most people think this is the only option. It's not. Sell and switch is an option that we named as such because you literally sell the practice on the front end, and on the back end, you switch roles with your buyer. You become the associate to work with or for that buyer. And for those of you who say, hey, I'm not ready to sell and be done just yet, that can be an excellent option. And it can be excellent for your buyer too, because their fear is that when you leave, the patients leave. Well, if you stick around for a while after that, then that's going to be a nice, smooth transition. And again, a win-win. Now, the associate buyout is an associate who's been working with you for a while and is going to buy you out and earn in. The only difference for that, to me, is that you're going to have them earn a targeted amount, and then they have the practice down, or they don't really have any money to buy you out. Okay. Traditional partnership is one that it works. It's just not as common. You have 2 of you who are looking to go a few more years, and you join forces together, make the practice more profitable, and you have a sale through that. The hybrid partnership is for those who have some really great associates or wanted somebody else to join to keep that practice going, but you don't want to necessarily sell 50-50. And the one a lot of people forget about is what I call the second act. Now, the second act can happen on top of any or all of these, but a lot of people view their sale as the last dime that they'll ever make, or the last meaningful work they'll ever do, or the last time that they'll ever get to contribute in some way, shape, or form to our profession. And that's simply not true. The second act is simply, what are you going to do next? And many of you can be compensated well for that. Some of you might even find that your second act is more profitable than your first act. And if you don't believe me, well, look at some of the people and consider how they got there. So you might know some of these people here. You got Dr. Dan Murphy, national speaker. Guess what? He sold his practice so that he could focus on his speaking business. We got Josh Axe, nutrition guru, sold his practice so that he could focus on that nutritional business. Deed Harrison teaches seminars. He's got his CBP school, essentially. Again, sold his practice so he can focus on that. Josh Wagner into coaching, sold his practice, focused on that. You might not recognize Dr. K here, but you probably used his Kinesio tape, sold his practice so that he can focus on that business. And of course, those aren't just the famous people that do that. You have others as well. So here's some of our clients that we helped to is Dr. Lauren, sold the practice, moved from one coast to the other. She just relocated, but she's too young to just hang it up. So she reinvented herself somewhere else. Or you can go on a mission trip. We've had clients start a wedding venue, vacation doctoring. And we even have this young looking guy, Dr. Tag here, literally sold his practice, went overseas for 10 years, and then came back. So again, the second act can really be very rewarding. And the important thing to realize is that your sale is not necessarily your final move of your life. Okay. So in the couple minutes to kind of wrap things up, I would love to give you a test, give you a question, give you a challenge. What is your next step that you are going to take so that you can avoid looking like the fella on the left, and so that you can move towards being able to sell your practice without giving it all away happily like the fella on the right? And if I might, I would like to offer you two challenges, two opportunities in this direction, because in my opinion, and talking to chiropractors over the years, you'll probably fall into one of two camps. And the first says, yeah, Tom, this was good information. I think I need to prepare myself better for my eventual practice sale or exit. I don't feel like I'm quite ready now, or I feel like if I did A, B, and C, I would be better prepared to maximize my value. Now, if that's you, and you're about 3 years or more away from your sale or transition, feel like you need to fix up the practice before you sell it, or you want to learn or earn more to improve your options, then I would like to make you a special offer, that a discount on our practice sale prep program. Basically, this is a program that walks you through 10 different areas of your practice to help improve its value, some of which we covered here in this webinar, and much deeper dive into how to improve your practice, again, to get it ready to sell. And if you think that might be what you need, then I'd also invite you to a free focus session call so that you can gain clarity on maybe what the options are, the best situation for you, and discuss your practice in this program. And if that's you, go ahead and type the word prepare into the box there, the questions, the chat box, and we'll get you some information on that. Now, the second group of people are in the stage of their practice or their business that they say, no, I don't want to spend time preparing anymore. I want to proceed. I need to move forward. I need to get this thing sold sooner than later. In fact, if we really light it up and say, hey, I want to light this spark and I want to get this thing sold in the next 0, that's now to 2 years. Okay. So if you're ready to sell, or if you want to transition your practice within the next 2 years so you can slow down or sell it to an associate, then I'd like to offer you a no obligation strategy session call where we can, again, talk about your situation, talk about the options for you. And since you're looking to sell within the next 2 years, then we'll also offer you a discount on the practice valuation. So you can put a proper price tag, not a ballpark figure on your practice, but a proper price tag so that you can literally move forward with your sale. So if that's you, then go ahead and type proceed in there. And again, we'll get you information so you can set up a free call. Or looking at the time here, I'd also, if we have time, Christy can tell us, we can have some questions. I'd love to answer some questions. Or if you wanted to go and just take advantage of one of those two offers, there's two links up there, strategicdc.com/prepare for those who'd like to take advantage of that, or proceed if you'd like to proceed with getting some information on selling your practice. So how are we doing on time here, Christy?
We'll take a few minutes. I had a couple of questions I wanted to.
I figure you've been watching the box better than me. So if you want to give me some, or do you want me to kind of go through and see if I can?
I've been moving them into the Q&A to keep them separate from the main chat. The first question was, what is the basic equation of what a practice is worth?
Yeah, so the basic equation, again, ballpark that you can use to get you into a rough, very rough in some cases, value would be to just take 60 to 80% of your collections average over the last 3 years. So you add up year 1, year 2, year 3, and then you take 60 to 80% of that. That gets most practices into a rough ballpark that are typical or average. Now, where we get further away and that formula can get dangerous is if your practice is not average. Either you're collecting well above, you have a very low overhead, you have a few associates, you have a lot of equipment. All those things will then affect that. But if you're looking for a rough, easy formula, that's about the simplest we can get.
Awesome. So following that up, it said, if COVID affected the last 2 years of revenue, how do you adjust for that? Or do you work 2 more years to increase the practice's revenue?
I'm glad you're asking that question now in 23, because here's why. The answer to the last couple of years was different, and it's better now. Okay. So if we get down to the nitty gritty of it, most banks do not use what we call a straight average formula. So literally add up 3 years, divide by 3. Okay. Most banks will use what they call a weighted average. And what that does is it places most weight or emphasis on the most recent year, a little less on the year before, and a little less on the year before that. So guess what? COVID right now, if we're looking back 3 years, that is the least important year of the 3. It doesn't mean it doesn't count at all. It's just weighted less. So depending on your situation, you may not even have to go forward and kind of improve the next 2 years. Or here's the other thing. Halfway through this year, they'll start using a projected year for 2023, and they'll start kind of reducing the importance of 2020. In 2024, good news for all of you with COVID is it is gone. 2020 stats are off the map. It has fallen off the radar. So unless you're the rare bird that says 2020 was my best year ever, then if that's the case, you better sell now, because you're missing.
Okay. Next question. If your practice is for sale and your lease is scheduled to be renewed, should you let the new buyer negotiate the lease or renew the lease to secure the location and then transfer that to the new owner?
Excellent question. Because most banks are going to want that business to stay in the same place. Okay. So the answer for your situation may depend on maybe even your location. You think is your business is in a location where it's likely that the landlord will like happily kick you out and put somebody else in, then I'd probably try to get a very small renewal. Okay. On the other hand, if you say, man, we are out in the middle of nowhere, that my landlord is lucky to have me, then you might be able to let things ride and even go month to month. It's most likely that the bank is going to want a long-term lease for your buyer, but you just don't want to sign a long-term lease to get stuck in that. Let the buyer handle that.
Excellent. Well, that was all of the questions. Tom, I've reposted those links. If you are proceed or prepare, so make sure you click on those. You can schedule that free call with Tom and his team. Just want to remind you again that we've moved to every other week for the webinar series. So next week, no webinar, but we will pick back up on April the 4th. We're going to have a first-time speaker, Aaron Reynolds, not a chiropractor, but a consultant. And he's going to be talking about suck it up, you're in sales. One of the things he's learned consulting for companies all across America, including in healthcare and even in veterinary, is that are we adequately educating our teams on selling chiropractic care? Because that's, we're trying to sell them on a service, and it is the service that you provide with your hands or even an instrument, depending on what technique you use. So are we doing everything we can to adequately train them to effectively communicate that to your patients? So it should be a very interesting webinar, and definitely something we have not done before. So I really encourage you to check it out. He actually has an article coming out later this year in the American Chiropractor on the very same topic. Then we're going to follow that up on April the 18th with Dr. Nona David, and she's going to be talking about how to go from burnout to freedom. And that is harnessing freedom by getting your financial peace of time, and peace of energy in your life. So I'm really excited about that. If you haven't checked out the webinar series schedule, it is up through June. We should probably have the third quarter up there in the next week or two. So check that out. Make sure you register for those webinars. Remember that we always record them. They're always available online on our website under archive. And if you register for a webinar and are unable to attend, not to worry. Everyone who registered gets a link to that recording. So I want to thank everyone for being here today. Thank you so much, Tom, for doing this webinar and being such an incredible resource for our providers, but again, most especially personally from me, because you never hesitate to answer my endless questions. I appreciate you so much.
My pleasure, Christy.
So everybody, I hope you have an amazing rest of your day and a fabulous week. And I look forward to seeing you back here in 2 weeks. If any of you are going to be in New Orleans this weekend for the ACC RAC conference, be sure to come find me. I'll be there Thursday afternoon and Friday morning, and I would love to connect in person. Y'all have a great week. See y'all soon. Bye, y'all.